storage, networking, anything dealing with infrastructure. For those of you who are not aware, at IBM we have 2 VMware offerings really in our cloud, and those are going to be the VMware Dedicated, which is going to be a full VMware environment on bare metal servers that you have complete and full access to. We have automation that goes through and does initial setup of NSX, vSAN if you choose it, NFS if you choose that, as well as deploying the infrastructure, creating the clusters, and just handing you over a cluster or multiple clusters that are just ready to go for you to do that. For those of customers that have smaller workloads, we have a VMware shared environment that we use, and that's what we're going to talk about today, where we use vCloud Director as the segmentation. IBM maintains the underlying infrastructure, and then we give customers access to these vCloud Director organizations, and then they can deploy their virtual machines, create their networks. They have access to the NSX edges to do all the networking components they need to do, all from a web interface that they'll access through IBM Cloud. Okay.
Cool.
So we kind of go in there, and just to touch on it, I heard that you guys also do Hyper-V. In IBM Cloud, we can deploy bare metal servers just like we can, virtual machines alongside infrastructure. And so if you wanted to look at a hybrid environment where you actually, kept Hyper-V, you can do that as well. I wasn't planning on talking about that today, but if that's something you're interested in, that can also be done in IBM Cloud, and have that integrated in with your on-prem architecture for bursting or migration or however you'd like to use it.
Okay. Yeah, we're not married to Hyper-V, just something we did from a cost perspective.
Right. Understood. So in the IBM Cloud Portal, so this is what the portal looks like after you've logged in, so you can see your resources and plan maintenance and cloud status and a bunch of other things. If you wanted to go and create a resource, the VMware resource, and you just click on Create Resource, and that'll bring up our catalog page where you can select any of the services that we have to offer. We're interested in VMware today, so we'll just search for VMware Solutions. And that will bring up our page where we can either select the VMware dedicated environment to build out, and it's just a simple web form. We would go through how many nodes we want, what type of processors, how much memory, a couple of clicks here and there, and 12 hours later, you'll have a full VMware environment dedicated just to you on bare metal hardware you can use. Or ultimately, you can use the VMware shared, where you go in and you basically select if you want an on-demand or a reserved instance. And so the difference between the two is an on-demand is going to be virtual machines that are charged on an hourly basis, or capacity that's charged on an hourly basis based on how much you use, versus reserved is going to be you're going to reserve an amount of capacity, and then you'll pay for that on a monthly basis, and you'll get a slight discount over an on-demand type of setup. We currently have these available in our 2 MCRs, one in Dallas and one in Frankfurt. And so you'll be able to select either of those. You can select different types of networking. If you want this to have access to the public internet, then you can do public and private. If you only want it to have access to the private network for accessing only by other virtual machines or other networking infrastructure that you have in IBM Cloud, then you can do that. And then you can set a capacity limit. 512 is generally what we've been there, and it doesn't affect the pricing on an on-demand. It just gives you an upper maximum for the amount of virtual CPUs that will be in your instance. Same thing with the RAM. And then these recommended services will be available for you to use on demand inside the environment. So if you wanted to do backups, Beam's there, and we'll show you how that looks. Same thing with Zerto. I don't have Zerto set up right yet, but I do have Beam where you can go look at that. So we go back and look at an actual live infrastructure. But essentially, what you can get to it by going to IBM Cloud and go to your VMware resources. And then here, this will list out all the different dedicated and VMware shared instances that you have. And then you can once you can select it and
Nick, you might want to go on mute. Sorry, Brian.
That's okay. Nick can.
Oh, sorry, I unmuted. My bad.
Yep.
So you just click on your instance, and that will bring up that'll bring up the loading page to kind of go to it. And then you'll have a login button where you click on to log into your vCloud Director console. And so once you're inside here, you'll see you'll have any of your VDCs will show up inside here, and you can click on individual ones. And in here, it's almost like a regular VMware environment. You can power on, power off, get consoles on machines. So if I want to get the console on this, I can click on that, and you get a console on it. This one was already logged in. You have the ability to create new virtual machines, and they can come from templates, either that IBM has created or via catalogs that you publish yourself. So I have a private catalog and a couple of OVAs I've uploaded into that, or I can select, I want a Windows 2019. Give it your name. There's a couple of options you'd select below. For instance, the primary NIC, you don't want it obviously connected. You tell it which network of the networks you've created that you want it to be part of, similar to what you would there. IP mode, whether or not you're going to do an IP pool or static, DHCP, any of the above. And it will tell you what the MAC address is, and then you can change it or have it reset to different ones if need be. And the next one is the custom storage policy. So by default, these are on certain storage policies, and you can change that policy by clicking on Use Custom, and then you have a bunch of different options. So you can go 0.25 IOPS up to 10 IOPS, and either encrypted or unencrypted from the backend perspective. And that's really all there is for creating a new virtual machine. Once you put all that information in, it's all automated on the back end. It will go and deploy that virtual machine and connect you up. You can see there's a couple of different types of templates we have, 2019, 2016, Red Hat 7 and 8, and then a couple of CentOS. This is a personal one I uploaded to it. OpenShift, if you're looking at your OpenShift clusters. And again, because you have your own catalog, you can upload your custom images to that and deploy those from there. Any questions so far?
Nope, very straightforward.
Inside here, you have complete access or near complete access to a lot of the networking components. So if you go down to your networks, these are all the networks I've created. So obviously you can create as many as you want, whether or not you want them routed or isolated. And these will obviously have segmentation from each other, and obviously segmentation from any other customer that happens to be running on a shared environment. You have your edge switches, which will allow you to configure your routing, your firewalls, IPsec tunnels, a whole plethora of different offerings. So if you click on services, this will bring up all the configuration. And if you've done much with VMware and NSX, this should look relatively familiar. So these are the firewall rules that you have. There's an order that they go through. I set mine bad because I'd say the default rule is to accept, because I was debugging some stuff and haven't changed it back. You can set up DHCP servers to respond to different address ranges, natting rules to allow you to go to different places. Now, one thing to understand is from a networking environment, this is in an NSX, so it's kind of in like a bubble. And so to get to the outside world, you'll do network address translation. And you can do that on both sides. You can do both source NAT and destination NAT, depending on what you needed to do. So you can see I have both SNAT and DNAT rules set up for the configuration here to allow traffic to come in and to allow traffic to go out, however that's needed. There's custom routing rules you can set up if you need to. So you have static routes. If you needed to do IPsec tunnels that are route-based, you can set up your static routes to route traffic across that tunnel. Load balancers, if you want to enable some load balancers, there are virtual machines that VMware will deploy, and you can maintain that stuff from here. VPNs, if you want to do IPsec tunnels, you can set that up through this little web interface. And then there's also an SSL VPN if you want to be able to connect into the environment from like a desktop machine. You can download an SSL VPN client and connect in and do your configurations that way. So there's a bunch of ways of getting into your environment. That's really it from a VMware perspective. It's a pretty simple offering. From a backup perspective, do you have any questions around this before I talk about?
No, very straightforward, like you said.
Yeah, there are usually customers that will have some questions around like how do I migrate my current environment into the shared environment. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. We've partnered with a third-party company that will go through and do a white glove service to help you migrate your virtual machines, your existing virtual machines. Generally from a VMware environment, I don't know if they do Hyper-V, but into the VMware shared. So it will do the migration in, and then you can spin those virtual machines up and continue processing without really a whole lot of change. Also, you can just copy export them as OVAs and upload them, and then redeploy the virtual machines from that aspect. So there's a couple of ways of doing that. From a backup perspective, actually, there's two things you can do. So there's also the ability to use Veeam Cloud Connect to do migration. So if you already use Veeam, and probably if you use VMware, I'm not sure if this would work for Hyper-V, but you can use the Veeam Cloud Connect we have to set up in your Veeam console a replication task that would push virtual machines into your VMware shared environment. So that's always a possibility. But from a backup perspective, you just click on your Veeam backups, and that will bring up the self-service portal. Of course, that locked me out. Where you can go in and configure your jobs. So you go to your jobs, and I already have one there, but you can go ahead and do a new create, and give it a name, and it's just it gives you a lot of the same Veeam functionality that you've probably already seen if you use Veeam. So number of backups, restore points to have, days to do, continue. You can configure archival backups, which virtual machines you want to do. So you just click on add, and it will go down. It's already connected to your VDC, so you can just go down and select the virtual machines you want. So you can see I have these virtual machines, so I could just go ahead and select. These are actually VApps. So you can go into the different VApps and find the ones you want to back up and do that. So add that in there. And then if you need to do guest processing, if you need to do file level restore, then you need to make sure that you enable guest file system indexing. Otherwise, you won't be able to do that. And then there'll be some credentials you can set up in here. And then you just have to schedule. When do you want to back it up? And then if you want to set email notifications for when there's successful warnings, errors, etc. So very simple setup for doing backups. It's a really easy environment if you already have an existing VMware environment and you want to move to a cloud offering and have backups integrated in, then it's a very simple one. You don't need to manage the backup servers. You don't need to manage the underlying infrastructure. It just kind of works.
So you're only paying for the storage you use for the backups, correct?
You're only paying for the storage used for anything. So for the backups and for the virtual machines that get deployed. So for instance, if I deploy a virtual machine and I tell it it's got a 100 gig disk, but I'm only using 20 gigs, I'm only going to get charged for 20 gigs.
Gotcha.
And then if you're doing on demand, that's on an hourly basis. So as you power virtual machines off, those virtual machines won't be charged for anymore. Windows licensing and Red Hat licensing are included in the cost of the virtual machines when they're spun up. And so when we do, if we do price calculations for you, it's really how many cores, how much memory, how much disk for how many hours, and whether or not it's a Windows license or a Red Hat license, or if it's a free license.
Got it.
Yeah, and I know we scheduled a lot of time for this, but that's really about the entirety of it. It's a pretty simple offering to have, and as I said, for migration services, we have a couple companies we work with to help customers migrate if they need that kind of help.
Yeah, and then including Mapsys, I should say. So we can help you do that, and we have lots of services guys that know VMware, IBM Cloud, and of course Veeam very, very, very well, and can help you figure out which way you want to get up there.
Exactly.
That's too simple, guys.
I can try to make it hard.
No, please don't.
Yeah, so this is generally a good solution for customers that, have, a handful, maybe 20, 30 virtual machines, where a cluster of 3 servers is too large, to really hold what to do. From a price perspective, it doesn't make sense to have a cluster that's going to be half populated. There is a cutover where it would make more sense to have a dedicated solution. I don't know exactly where that lies, but it really depends on how many, virtual machines you have and how much resources that you need under those virtual machines.
And then if you wanted some kind of redundancy, you could replicate these virtual machines to a different region or something like that.
So there is a Zerto environment. There is a Zerto client to allow
Okay, cool.
do replication. Currently, right now, the only offerings we have in the US are going to be in Dallas, where there's 3 data centers you could deploy into. Eventually, it's going to be coming to the other MZRs that we have. So Washington, D.C. Will be on the list of places we extend to, which would be a better DR. But we do have 3 data centers in Dallas you can go to.
Okay.
Or if you wanted to, you can go into Frankfurt, though that's probably going to be not ideal for a lot of customers.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and to put a little bit more finer point under that, right? It's a. I mean, how long has this been out, Brian? Like maybe not even a year yet, or a year now?
So yeah, it's been out about a year.
Yeah.
We've done some improvements. We've worked with VMware, to make the product more robust.
Sure. So it's it's a little bit newer product in that sense. So it's rolling out throughout the rest of the IBM data center landscape, as IBM rolls them out. So you heard DC's next, and then wherever's next after that, et cetera, et cetera. Because I've had some customers also say the same things to me, Brian. Like, I don't want to replicate the Frankfurt. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it, but you could.
That's
And
true.
then
Yeah.
replicating within the same Dallas area, even though there's 3 or 4 data centers there, wasn't, well, what if there's a tornado goes right through all 3 data centers? Okay, you got me there. Okay,
Yeah. I will point out that we haven't had, to my knowledge anyways, there's been no IBM data center that we've had that's actually gone down, since IBM has taken over from when we purchased SoftLayer. And the data centers that we do select, we select those data centers, those providers, based on their ability to, have high priority for, fuel for backup. So if we do lose power for whatever reason, they're connected to multiple grids generally. That they also are priorities for getting fuel to run backup generators, and
Yep.
that they also have lots of diverse network connectivity. So there's not a single provider. There's many providers that we have for either peering or just connectivity that we have for
Right.
those.
That's
So
a
for our
good point,
data
Brian.
center, right. So even if you were to just to do replication, I know it's not necessarily ideal, because it could be a crater, but within the Dallas, they're geographically not right next to each other. They're going to be spread around the Dallas area.
Yeah.
The centers are going to be pretty solid. I do know that having it in Washington would be much better, but from a DR perspective, you can.
Yeah, I mean, if something takes out 3 data centers in Dallas that are, geographically distant, somewhat distant from one another, we got bigger problems.
Yeah, there's probably, if we lose Dallas, there's probably
Yeah.
bigger problems in the world.
You got it.
Exactly.
You got it, for sure. I do want to mention this too, because this is probably really important too, and compared to those other clouds, is there are no egress fees between IBM data centers and regions. So you could go to, Frankfurt if you wanted to across the ocean, and there's no fees to get over there. Whereas every other cloud provider you look at least the big ones, I should say, you will be charging any egress fees outside of a data center area or service area. So, I mean, that's sort of a big deal when you're doing replication and this type of stuff. Or if you have operations that follow the sun, right? I mean, there's no other large cloud in the world to use other than IBM, because there's too many egress charges as you try to follow the sun going from location to location to location. Make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Yep. As far as I know, I think IBM is one of the only large cloud providers that actually has a shared VMware environment that you can utilize and then have it have access to other infrastructure that you may have. So you could actually deploy the shared environment and a dedicated environment and have those connected, from a networking perspective, and not really vMotion back and forth, but definitely be able to talk to those things, or any other IBM services as well, all across our private network without having to go out to public.
Awesome.
So
Is there,
oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to ask if you had any questions.
I really don't. This is extremely straightforward. I really don't. This is exactly what I wanted to see, is how all this works.
Yeah. And as I said, if you start down this path and you have, questions or, issues arise, then, you can always reach out to me and, we can work through those issues.
Sounds great.
So Nick,
Hey, Nick,
Wayne,
is there
sorry.
a workload that you want to try to migrate, or do you have? I know you said you were 100% on-prem and you were exploring. Is there any budget that would allow you to give this a test run?
I'd have to look to see if we have a workload that we could use, run up there as a test. I'll have to look into that one.
The interesting thing here too, Nick and Wayne, is you can connect the NSX based VPN here to your corporate site, and away you go. Right, you'll see your workloads just like you would on your network, as long as you get the routing and everything correct for them, and you're good to go. All right, so it's a popular way, obviously, of using it. Right, you can move them up and down as you see fit.
No, it makes total sense. Wayne, do you have any questions?
Nope, I'm good. Same with you. It's fairly straightforward.
Well, what do you guys think? I mean, is it pretty compelling? Do you like the offering? You want to? What should Tony and I do? Should we follow up with you next week and see if we can identify a workload or two for you folks to take up there and take it for a spin? Make sure it's everything we say it is.
Yeah, give me a couple weeks and we'll see what we can find a workload that would be good to migrate that, wouldn't impact production. It's kind of a test workload. That'd probably be good next steps.
Yeah. Tony, what do you think?
Sorry, I was talking into a muted computer.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, so Nick, this is Tony. I'll reach out to you after Memorial Day and we'll continue the conversation.
That sounds great.
All right, if there's nothing else, give you back a bunch of time.
Cool. I will not update my calendar so people will leave me alone and I can get some work done.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
I thank you all. I really appreciate your help.
Yeah, we'll
Thanks,
be in
Brian.
touch here, you
It's
gentlemen.
good to meet you, Brian.
Thanks,
You're welcome.
everybody.
Yeah,
Have a
thanks
good day.
again, Brian. Did great. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.